This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 95.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I'm here again at the Teach Better 2022 conference for a follow-up episode to show 94 without my co-host, Mr. Matt Rogers. Funny story about that, not that it's related to this at all, but I have attended at least 5 to 6 or more Phillies games every year since 2007. And if you know anything about the Philadelphia Phillies history, from 2008 through 2011, they were in the playoffs, actually 2007 as well. I didn't attend any playoff games because I didn't have any perks. I've been a season ticket holder since 2012. This is the first year they've been back to the playoffs where I could attend my first postseason game. But I'm in Ohio for this unbelievable conference, which I'm thrilled to be here for. And Matt is actually using my tickets, and he's currently sitting in the Philly Stadium right now. So again, I am here at the Teach Better 2022 conference, bringing you short snippet conversations that I've had with teachers here. I did the same thing in show 94. And to kick this episode off, I just want to share some of the things that I learned while here. One of the most interesting things I learned was about the prefrontal cortex, which I know that doesn't sound thrilling, but it's the portion of the brain where we learn common sense and we use our decision-making skills. I learned from David Schmittou, who's a great presenter, that it does not fully develop until the age of 25, which we've known. But they are now finding, mostly in America, that the prefrontal cortex starts to develop at birth and continues to develop until the age of 5, and then it stops its development and continues development at approximately the age of 17 and finishes at the age of 25. What's interesting about that is when we go into school, we typically stop making decisions. Everything is force-fed to us. So I actually inserted that into my presentation, Teach Like a CEO, that I had the following day. And just to get us to think about how can we start to get students to make more decisions? How can we give them more control and more freedom in our classroom to be decision makers to continue to develop those skills? So when you go to conferences, you'll attend a lot of sessions and you might not pull everything away from the session, but sometimes there's just one moment, one fact, or one strategy that you can pull out that can really have an impact on your teaching. So as I said in show 94, I highly encourage you to, one, look at this conference for 2023, but look at other conferences and start to expand yourself and learn from other amazing, great educators that are presenting at these events. So I'm gonna jump off here and we're gonna jump right into some of our conversations that I had at the conference in Akron, Ohio.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
All right, we are here live at the Teach Better 2022 conference, and I'm sitting down with another amazing teacher, so thank you for joining me.
Yes, absolutely.
Please introduce yourself, let us know where you're from, and just kind of give us a snapshot of your career in education.
Okay, so I'm Karen Evans. I teach 6th grade special ed in Michigan, and I have taught every grade K through 12, both in Illinois and Michigan. I've been in Michigan for about 4 years now, so...
Okay, and has it been special ed for your entire career? It's been mostly
special ed. I've done 2 different years where I taught gen ed.
Okay.
Yeah, both in 4th grade for whatever reason.
So what would you say as a special ed teacher that, because you're a special ed teacher, things that you've learned from having that position that benefited you as a general education teacher? Mm-hmm. And then a second follow-up to that is, after being a general education teacher and going back to special ed, what did you learn from that experience that helped you be a better special ed teacher?
So I think my special ed mindset is always focused on every kid as an individual, and that has helped out loads just in the general ed classroom. Like, I feel that every kid should have an IEP. Like every kid should be
Right.
learning at their just right level. So that's something I've carried into Gen Ed. And then the other thing, which I'm going to speak on later at this conference, is interoception. So having the kids like reconnect to their physical bodies and then connecting those body sensations to emotions and those emotions to like tools that they can use to help them feel better. So I use that with my kids a lot as well.
Can you give me a pretty specific example for that? Because I find that very interesting.
We basically go through the entire body. So the first 3 that we've covered this school year are our hands, and we do experiences with our hands. So I'll have the kids clap really hard, and how does that feel after you're done clapping? Like your hands tingle, and you're just like doing all these experiences, like running your hands under cold water. How does it feel with warm water? How does it feel to hold an ice cube? Just like actual sensations that bring you back to your body. And then we also did that for our mouth and for our feet. And then you're supposed to do each body part as like separate and then connect them later to emotions. But my kids this year, they are able to do it pretty well. So we're doing like the body experiments, and then we connect it to emotions, and then we have tools in our classroom that they can use. So right now in my classroom, there's tools to make their hands feel more comfortable in class, and their mouths and their feet.
Interesting.
So,
and what's the goal of that for the students to?
So
how does that help them?
I feel like it's just to make them feel like more connected to their body, first of all, so that they can recognize those emotions and process their emotions through the day. But then also just like more practically, like they're just feel more at home in my classroom,
Right.
and their bodies are ready to learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
What got you into that, and where did you research or learn about that?
So
or-
I know a lot about zones of regulation, and that's on like, having the emotions and then identifying what your emotional state kind of is so that you can connect it to actions. But there's this prior piece that seemed to be missing where like my kids were not present in their own bodies. So before you can have an emotion, you need to realize like my stomach is feeling this way, or I notice my heart is beating fast and stuff
Right,
like that.
right.
So I learned about interoception from Kelly Mailer is her name, and that's just like almost like a level 1, I feel like.
Right.
Kids have to notice like those sensations in their bodies.
Does it help a lot with like de-escalation and coping strategies? Do you feel
Yeah.
that they're able to more successfully utilize those
Yes.
skills?
There was one time I was teaching in a classroom that was actually housed in a locker room, which is kind of unusual, but I like
Sounds
snuck
like an ideal learning environment
right,
to me.
exactly. I was just kind of having fun with one of my kids, and I like snuck around the corner and scared her, and she was like, oh, Miss Evans, my heart is beating so fast, you scared me. So that was really cool to see, like I'm seeing this in action. I'm seeing the kids be more connected to their bodies.
That's very
And
interesting.
I was just really excited about this conference coming up, and I'm just really open with my kids and telling them about stuff that's going on in my life. And one of my students was like, Miss Evans, like, I can tell you're hyper today. Why? Or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, how can you tell I'm hyper? And he was like, you're speaking really fast. So, like, they're able to identify those body signals in other people as well that can be linked to emotions.
Wow, that's really impressive, and what I love about it is it's allowing them to learn about themselves, learn
Yep.
about others, and how it translates into other things. So
Right.
a big part of my classroom was always the students had to do a lot of collaboration. They had to explain their thinking a lot. They had to explain what we were doing in class. And one of the coolest things from that is anytime an administrator would come into my room, it's usually pretty chaotic, and they would ask what's going on. I would go talk to the students, ask them.
Right.
And almost every time the feedback that I got from the administrator was, I can't believe the conversation I just had with a 10-year-old.
Wow.
But they were constantly exposed to that. So it's kind of the same thing where
Yep.
you're exposing them to learn and understand and recognize those.
Yep.
And now you're seeing it translate where you're not directly doing it, right?
And I think that's so important to empower kids in that way too, like by saying like, this is what we're doing and here's why, and then they can explain that to other people that
Right.
come in the room.
Right, exactly. So we always wrap up our shows with the exit ticket, which is the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you a couple of them, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
What is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
I think they need to meet the kid where they are and just build a connection. And sometimes that's academics, giving them their just right learning. But a lot of times it's just seeing them as an actual human being and making that connection with them.
Absolutely. So the school year goes in waves. There are times like around conferences, report cards, where our job is extra stressful because of all the other stuff we have to do.
Yes.
So when we're in those moments, what would you want to say to those teachers to help them power up?
I think that they need to have routines in their life that are always there that help them find ways to have more than just school be their focus. So a lot about different routines. Like I do the Fly Lady and a whole bunch of weird stuff to keep myself organized, but also like, how do you take care of yourself? Like what's in your life besides teaching? I think that's really important. Who are you as a person?
So last question I'll ask you is, what are you most excited about here at the Teach Better conference?
I'm so excited to meet like all these people. I'm a editor for this team, so there's a lot of people I know through their writing, but I haven't actually like seen them face to face. And then there's other people that are brand new to me that I can connect with, and just like it's not just right now that I'm learning from people, but it's like a long-term thing where following them on social media and just connecting over the next few years.
Right. So on that note, how can our audience connect with you, follow along with you in your journey?
So I am on Twitter, _ Karen Evans. And then I also, outside of teaching, I have a YouTube channel where I talk about my passion for reading, and that's more like a personal side of me, but that is Roving Reader on YouTube.
Awesome. We will link up to all of that on our show notes page, which can be found at powereduup.com/teachbetter22. So thank you so much for your time. It was nice meeting you.
Yes, thank you.
And I look
You
forward
too.
to connecting with you more while we're here together.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, so we're here live at the Teach Better 2022 conference. Eric, it's a pleasure to sit down in person with you. This is Eric Show 37 Youngman. So you're an assistant superintendent, and you're at a Teach Better conference. Why?
I love being involved with Teach Better. I've written blogs for them. I try to connect with them on their Tuesday morning shows.
Okay.
It's awesome to interact with other administrators as we're collaboratively problem solving about some key ideas. In the end, I like to learn from everyone, and so a lot of the Teach Better educators have been very instrumental in different conversations. There were some examples even last year when we were, the year before when we were coming through the pandemic and I was looking for support. I could reach out to them in the masterminds and they could help point me in the right direction. Sometimes it's about people who have presentations. Sometimes it's connecting you with a principal or other educators who have experienced that. So I think it's just a great group of people who are helping others and also willing to help share their expertise.
Right. And I know you're big on growth mindset, and you're modeling growth mindset right now as an assistant superintendent, being at a conference that's really more geared towards teachers. I mean, I know there are leaders here and there's a good mix, but it's about teaching better. Right, and you're here as a very high-level leader, still focused on that. So, what have you seen so far, or what's a message that you already know that you want to take back to your teachers that you're seeing here?
I try to make notes from each of the presenters. Chad started with a great keynote where he was talking about teaching better and continuous improvement, and talking about getting through learning from failure. I don't use the word failure. I try to talk about setbacks and mistakes, but I think building that continuous improvement, we're saying similar things. Stephanie Howell did a great collaborative discussion where she was talking about the importance of SEL and modeling explicit behaviors. And then I was listening to Tom Schimmer talking about grading. And I could learn and listen to him all the time. He has a phenomenal podcast that is also on Teach Better, but just learning different ways to talk about grading. There was a lot of high school teachers in there and middle school teachers, and I think that's a critical group as we're talking about grading impacts. But again, just learning lots of different questions that we can ask to empower reflection from our teachers to have these important conversations.
What was a takeaway from that grading one? Because I had it flagged myself, but didn't end up getting to that session.
One of them about change is it is more emotional than tactical. So say we're making a big change, we also have to recognize what emotions are involved and kind of support that. Other components had to do with just some specific grading research and history. They were there for a reason and a purpose. So they weren't just made up out of nowhere. So how can we recognize that and just, again, ask different questions so we're really accurately reporting the student grades.
Right. So what is, being at a conference like this that's incredibly well organized and well put together, what are takeaways for you as a leader to think about how you can improve or change the professional development happening in your district from things that you're seeing at a conference like this?
I think the common vision and terminology is important to build on. I was helping greet people who were participating, and one of their feedback is they were thrilled to see that students were here welcoming people. And I think that's a nice little takeaway, that as we're doing school events, sometimes how can we empower our students to be leaders as well. I think also just the passion when we're talking about setting up this conference. If things don't go exactly well, how can we collaboratively adapt and work together? But a lot of it is just the strong relationships. People are interacting, they're sincere, and you can build off that. I've talked with you a couple times. I can build on those conversations. If you just are not as personable and don't connect with the other educators, then you don't have that trust. Then you can build that and transfer that to the classroom as well, where a lot of the times you really do need to build those relationships and provide opportunities for students to get to know each other. And then once they feel more comfortable, then we can build on the academics. So again, just that collaborative work, trusting each other on common vision.
So I know you've gone through a couple of professional changes since we last had you on. So share a little bit about that, and more importantly, what have you learned from these professional transitions that you've made?
I was the curriculum director the last time we spoke, and then for a month I was the interim superintendent, and now I'm the assistant superintendent. And the biggest change is now I'm still focused on curriculum and teaching and learning, but now also I have some other opportunities to collaborate with staff on some bigger initiatives as we're facilitating changes and interacting with the school board. So I think my interactions with the bigger planning and the school board and bringing in other administrators. As we came off the pandemic, we now had some transition with new administrators and administrator assistants. And so I think that awareness of when we're welcoming new people, we can talk about the history, but we really don't have to say this is the way it's been, this is how it has always been, this is how it should be. The other thing is when we're making different changes, how can we focus on the problem solving? Sometimes we make an assumption and we start to figure out who did what and why did they do it. Let's just collaboratively focus on the problem solving. So I think the problem solving and just the moving forward, when we have a question, it's always a good opportunity to look at how can we be different, how can we move forward, rather than focusing so much on learning why it was established in the past.
Excellent. So a question that I like to ask a lot of people that I know I didn't ask you is, what advice do you have? This is a total shift from where we were just talking. What advice do you have for a second-year teacher? And I say ask for a second-year teacher because first-year teachers are literally just trying to survive the year. Year two, they've had a little bit of time to reflect, and they've gone through a lot of the instruction, so they can have a little bit more of a systematic approach to the way they're teaching. So what is one piece of advice that you would give to a second-year teacher?
Adapt when things are not working as well as planned, and seek input from students. I think a lot of the times we're looking and trying to solve these things out. If you just explicitly ask the students who are experiencing it, they'll shock you with a lot of your answers. But you have to be adaptable, and that's why I said that first. As you learn information, how can you make things better? If you are integrating or implementing new curriculum, that first year you're understanding it, but in the second year, what are the tweaks with the pacing, with the supports? How can you change it? And again, as you're thinking through that to differentiate, again, ask your students. They're the ones who can give you some great feedback and guidance.
Awesome. So the last thing I'll ask you is, you've done the exit ticket, the same 4 questions we ask all our guests, but I'm pretty sure that this question was added after I had you on. We tweaked it a bit. So it's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What do you think separates the teachers that constantly seek to change, innovate, and implement new teaching strategies?
You have to continue to read and listen and connect with other educators. I mean, every person that I'm talking to here, I have a takeaway. Every podcast that I'm listening to, even on Twitter, how can you just continue to read and reflect, and then how can you make it your own? How can you personalize it for your classroom, your school district, and the educators that you work with?
Awesome. So the last thing I'll ask is just how can our audience connect with you and follow along with your journey?
On Twitter, @Eric_Youngman. It's Eric with a K. And then my website is ericyoungman.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eric. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you sitting down, and everything will be linked up on our show notes page, which can be found at powereduup.com/teachbetter22. Thanks again.
Continue to lead and inspire.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're here live at the Teach Better 2022 conference, and I'm sitting down with another amazing educator. So thank you for joining me. Please introduce yourself. Let our audience know where you are coming from and just what your role in education is.
Sure. My name is Kevin Butler. I am a 6th grade teacher in Los Angeles, California. So
Wow.
yes.
Far journey to get here.
Yes. I left the warm sunshine, but I'm super happy to be here.
So 6th grade teacher. So has that been your length of your career, or what other roles have you had?
Great question. 19 years in 5th grade. So
Okay.
this is my first year in 6th grade. So
Okay.
I transitioned up, and it's like a middle school setting. So I'm teaching just language arts.
Okay.
Kids rotating through.
Okay. Former 5th grade teacher as
Okay.
well. So 5th grade was the end of the line in elementary school for
Okay.
our district as well. And so were you departmentalized in 5th grade, or did you teach all of the subjects?
All of the subjects.
Okay, so what do you feel you learned from teaching all of the subjects that has enhanced or improved your ability to now be a solely language arts teacher versus if you had just only taught language arts your entire career?
I think just being able to connect language arts to different subjects. I think that's super important. I love teaching social studies, especially 5th grade American history. And when people heard I was leaving like 5th grade and going into just a language arts position, their first thing was like, "But you love social studies so much." I said, "But I could still do that with language arts." I'm still trying to navigate how to do that in math. You could incorporate it into science as well. But I think just that idea of being able to put language arts, reading, writing, grammar, vocabulary into all of the subject areas.
Right.
No matter what subject it is, where there's reading involved somewhere.
Right.
So also helping kids navigate like challenging texts that they will see in other classes too. It's really
What has been a struggle for you moving from having your kids all day, where we always have the freedom of saying, you know what, we need 10 more minutes of math today, we don't need 10 more minutes of science, to now you're on a regimented schedule. I don't know if there's bells involved, but the kids have to show up at the exact time and leave at the exact time. What's been a struggle with that?
That has been a huge struggle. I think the biggest obstacle is I'm all about relationships. And when you have them all day long, you see that whole child. Now I'm just seeing snapshots of their day. And how do you give first period the same energy as you do like 6th or 7th period?
Right.
So that's been a struggle that am trying to navigate
Right.
now.
And also, you're teaching the same thing multiple times a day. So by the 3rd or 4th, in theory, your lesson is
Right.
better. And I actually, so I'm now an instructional coach
Okay.
for secondary school.
Okay.
So I'm working with middle school and high school teachers. And it's kind of a joke, but it's also kind of serious. I'll tell teachers, consider getting ahead or with your later classes of the day or falling behind with your earlier classes so that your first period class actually gets your 4th run at a lesson. They're not always getting your first run, because you can't deny that it's going to be a better lesson the 3rd or 4th time you've done it.
Right.
And it just like mixes it up where you, like you said, that energy level is a little bit different. It just gives you a different frame of mind that you're not doing on purpose with your different classes. So transitions in a self-contained classroom are transitions from one subject to another, whereas now your transitions are them walking in and them walking out. So what have been some transitional strategies that you've tried that have worked or have not worked to kind of kick off your class with some force?
I think it's just going back to like the basics. Like I still stand by the door and greet every class as they come through. They're high fives. The first 2 or 3 minutes, it's tell me something about your day, or if it's a Monday, how was your weekend? And like still having those little conversations that are so important in when you're in a self-contained classroom that are usually done like in your morning meeting time. So I'm not giving 10 or 15 minutes to them, but I'm still giving a little bit of time to build that community with them.
How has it been building that community and relationships with the students, because you now have so many more, and like you said, you're getting a snapshot of their day?
More with less time. So it's been, that was also a challenge. Like, how do you get to know them? And it's taken more time because, again, when you have them all day long, you get to know them really well, really quickly.
Right.
We're at about the 6th or 7th week of school right now, and now I finally feel like I'm starting to really be able to connect with them. It's just different, and it's kind of why I wanted to go to 6th grade. I wanted to see what it was like in a different setting.
Right. What would you do differently next year to feel like you know them in week 3 or 4 versus 6 or 7?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I'm not sure if I have an answer to it. I think just continuing to build in that time for like check-ins and maybe trying to extend those morning chats a little bit or afternoon chats. But that's a really good question that I do not have an answer for.
Right. Something to think about
Yeah.
as you prepare and reflect, and maybe even starting your curriculum later, right? Doing team building activities for that first week or first couple weeks where you establish that, because you know that once the community is established, the learning happens at a faster pace and a more meaningful pace for the students. What's been the best part about transitioning into being departmentalized?
I'll be super transparent and easy. We're planning. Like I only have to plan one thing a day versus 6 things a day.
And your sub plans to be here were way easier to plan.
So easy. It's
Yeah.
like you do it once and then it's just like repeat what you did in that period. Repeat what you did.
Right.
But at the same time, it does get, when you teach it like the 4th time, even the kids will be like, have you read that now 4 times to kids? I'm like, yep. Yep, and I've read it, but it's all good.
Right. So I taught 5th grade.
Okay.
And then I transitioned into being an elementary STEM teacher.
Okay.
So similar thing of they come in for a 45-minute class. I was seeing different grade levels, so it was a little bit more variety in what I was teaching. But as I got to, the 3rd, 5th grade class where I was doing the same lesson, maybe on a different day, I sometimes felt as though I was skipping things that I felt like I didn't need to do anymore, or almost like I already felt like they learned it, so I was feeding them the answers. So what's been a challenge with that 3rd or 4th time? There's the obvious benefit of it where you see what went well, what didn't go well, but what's the hard part of doing it a 4th or a 5th time?
Remembering what you said, remembering how you gave directions. Just the other day, I really messed up because we were reading a book, Walk Two Moons by Sharon Creech, and there were some things in there that I try to keep hidden from the kids. I try to gloss over, and I accidentally gave something away to one of my classes that the other class, we had already talked about it. So I think just like staying up on things, not rushing things either. Like I think when you teach it the first time, you're trying to get through so much. The second time, it's really good because like it's fresh in your mind. And I think just being able to have that time in between classes to like tweak things, but you can't tweak it too much because you can't set off your other classes.
Right.
So,
Yep. So we always wrap up our shows with the exit ticket, which is the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. So I'm going to ask you a couple of those questions. What is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
get to know them and smile. You need to smile. You need to be happy.
I love it. What is the... I'll go with this one instead. It's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What do you think separates teachers who are constantly seeking to change, innovate, and utilize new teaching strategies in their classroom?
I think people are just scared of failure. I have like a big poster in my classroom, like, everybody makes mistakes. We need to normalize in this country as a culture that mistakes are okay. So just allowing teachers to make mistakes and try something new. My biggest advice with that is do it with somebody else. Like either do it with the colleague next door or across the hall, and just be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
How do you, when you make those mistakes as a teacher, what's the next step after that?
You've got to reflect on it. Like where was the mistake and how can I make it better?
And how does it benefit students when you make mistakes as a teacher?
Because I just had a parent-teacher conference about this, because we talk about it's okay to make mistake, it's
Right.
okay, but
Right.
they have to see you actually make mistakes.
Right.
And I think it makes it real for them. Like, oh yeah, like Mr. Butler did make a mistake today, then that's okay. So I think allowing them to see it is so big, is so big. And whether it's just something minor, spelling something wrong on the board, or like, oh, I forgot to do something in this lesson. We're going to pause for a moment and, reflect later. Like, so I think letting them see you make mistakes is really important.
And being explicit and pointing it out.
Yeah. Kids
right.
are very perceptive. They know.
Right.
And don't be scared, because if they see that you're scared of making mistakes, they're going to be scared of making mistakes. I think as a writing teacher this year, that's the biggest. The kids are so nervous about writing.
Right.
And is this good enough? Is it long enough? Is it good enough? Are there enough words? And I tell them all the time, you're the author.
Right.
Like, you write what you need to write. And the revision process is when we could start talking about that, but don't be scared of making mistakes.
And like you said, we have to expose them to that, and we have to create situations where they see the purpose in that failure. So I
Right.
was recently doing a professional development session teaching teachers how to use a Sphero robot.
Okay.
And I had a challenge for them, and they spent so much time discussing, trying to develop the perfect code, and they never ran it once. And I eventually said, stop talking and just do it and see what happens.
Right.
You know, I would always like to tell my students there's two types of failure, and recognizing that failure is important in deciding how you approach the challenge. So there's video game failure, which you can fail over and over and over again, and there's no negative repercussions. Your game doesn't like dissolve into dust once you've lost the game 10 times. You can do it 1,000,000 times. And then there's financial failure, where there will be a negative repercussion if you fail. So like, you know, NASA sending a spaceship, they have to simulate 1,000,000 times, because that's a $55 billion spaceship that they're sending. That can't be their trial. Right? So recognizing which one is it helps you decide, how do I approach this? If it's video game failure, I'm going to try it, see what happens, reflect, and try again. If it's that financial piece, I need to find ways to simulate or to get advice before I present, or whatever the case is. So just getting kids to see that so they can decide what type of approach, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So last thing I'll ask you is just, how can our audience connect with you? How can they follow along with your journey as a teacher?
Sure. Across all social media, it's just the Kevin J. Butler. Kevin J. Butler at gmail.com. I have a brand new book that came out in August.
Congratulations.
Published by Dave Burgess Publishing, Lights, Cameras, Teach, a screenplay for engagement, culture, and relationships.
Awesome. I love it. Well, we will link up to all of those on our show notes page, which can be found at poweredup.com/teachbetter22. So it was nice meeting you.
Awesome.
Thank you for sitting down.
Same.
And good luck.
Thank you.
We're here live at the Teach Better 2022 conference, and I have the pleasure of sitting down with another amazing educator. So please officially introduce yourself, let us know where you're coming from, and give us a snapshot of your career in education.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Ken. Thanks for having me. My name is Melody McAllister, and I flew in from Anchorage, Alaska. I'm not from there, but I do live there. And I've been a teacher. I've been in education since 2004, so I am kind of old at this point. But right now, I am not in a classroom, in a public school classroom. I do homeschool, and I also work for Spaces EDU.
So what was your niche as a classroom teacher? What was the thing that you were super passionate about that was a driving force of everything you did in your classroom?
You know, I used to think it was SEL, and I always tried to reach my kids in an emotional way, like to make, the content that I was teaching, more personal. But now I realize it was community. Like, I've always been a huge community advocate, bringing parents in, making sure, and I didn't even realize I was doing this, but, creating bridges from home to school so that everything flowed well together. And now that I know so much more about like the whole child and how to help, students really learn, it makes sense, and that's, I love it. But if you would have asked somebody else, they would have said I was a science teacher, fifth grade science teacher.
Can you give us a concrete example of how you incorporated community into a lesson or into your classroom?
One of the things that I absolutely love is I would ask my parents of my students, when we came back to school, I always let parents know that it wasn't just their kids coming into my classroom. They were too. They were a part of like who we were. And I was like, anytime you want to come in and talk about your career or your life and share with us, we would love that. Letting them know that they were invited into my classroom. And I will say one story. One of my students, his mom came in. She was in her formal, she's Muslim. She was dressed like, formally. And she came in and talked about her career with like Microsoft and all the different degrees that she had. And we were in a very diverse population. This was amazing. Like, we had such a mix of everybody, And for the girls in the class to see see that you can, be anything, in a male-driven,
Right.
workforce. You can
Right.
still do things. And I watched her son, and he was just glowing. He was so proud of his mom. And then another parent came in, and she works for senior citizens. Like she goes around those homes and make sure that everything is well. She facilitates that, and she shared with us how important it is to talk to the seniors in our life and to develop relationships, even if we don't have grandparents. Just how valuable they are.
Right.
And those are the lessons that they will always remember.
That's awesome. So tell us about Spaces EDU. How does it? What teachers should look into it? Like, why should teachers look into it? Give us a snapshot of it.
So actually, I do use it with my own kids, and it is literally what puts buzzwords into action.
Okay.
So we upload learning artifacts. So my one of my children, she's her reading development has been slower than the others, and we started uploading her reading into because it's video. It has video and audio features. She was always able to participate because everything I share with them through that, and I travel like every month. I travel. And we still have school when I travel because we can communicate, and she can always participate because that's audio and video feature. And I really think that we should normalize that more. And ed tech, I really don't care about ed tech unless it helps me to build relationships and build up kids, right? And so that's basically what it does. Everybody has something to celebrate at the end of the year. Standardized tests, this and I know this, and probably your listeners, well, of course they know this, right? It doesn't share the full picture.
Right.
It doesn't give everybody something to be proud of at the end of the year. And it definitely doesn't show the growth that you and I see in the classroom. So that's what Spaces EDU does. Students are able to share their talents, upload their artifacts, whether it's at home or at school. There's that bridge connection, right? You can connect parents to the platform so they can also see. And then you have that community piece where there's it's like the virtual carpet time, whether you're teaching, upper grades or lower grades. You have that where you can put a prompt out, whether it's academic or just, like a quote. One of my friends uses it and he puts a quote of the day or a word of the day, and you get to talk about that. You can teach digital citizenship through that, which is super important. And it's all very safe, and I would say even a brave space. Our students that we don't normally get to know until the end of the year because they're so shy, they sometimes feel a lot more empowered to write out their answers or to share the audio or video. And so you're getting a relationship with them sooner than you would normally. And again, I just want to normalize that our students need more video. They need to be able to replay things. They want to share a different way than you and I grew up with. I know you're younger than me, but still, you have some old school stuff, right?
Yep.
And the audio, everything that a teacher can share on there, it allows every single learner to participate, whether they can write or read on level or not. Same with parents. And that should be more normalized.
Right. That's great. So I want to ask you a couple of our exit ticket questions, which are the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week.
All right, a surprise question.
So let's go with, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
To make a student's school experience better. I think just literally taking the time to see them as a whole person. And I honestly don't think that we can do that well until we see ourselves as whole people. But to know that they're not just a student, that they have other roles in life just as we do as people too. And I think when we embrace that for ourselves, we can help others to see that about them as well. And let them share their TikTok. Let them share what they're doing. When we can put that into what we're teaching, and relate it back somehow, they're going to be plugged in naturally.
Right. I love it. So, last question I'll ask you. What is the best advice you've received? Could be from a colleague, a supervisor, or even a student.
God, the best advice? I don't know. I will say I had a student in 5th grade. When he entered my class, I knew he was smarter than me, and he still is. And now he's in his late 20s, and he shared something. We follow each other on socials, and we still I went to his graduation, everything like that. And, we believe a lot of the same things politically, and we get a lot upset about the same things politically. And I had put up a post, and he said this so eloquently. He was just like, we get it why there's so much division. He's like, well, what I really, and he's like, and I agree with everything that you're saying, but what can we do to, make that common ground?
Right.
And and he said it in a really eloquent way. I'm butchering it all completely. But this is a young man really reaching into my heart, saying it in a way that made me wake up. And I thought, what can we do to be more unified, regardless of what we believe? What can we do to heal that parent versus teacher? You know, what can we do to really heal where a lot of education has gone wrong, you know, in our society?
Right.
And I guess, you know, from him. And I watched this kid, man, have you ever had a kid that you could put with anybody and they would just do well?
Yep.
I've never had that except for with him. And his name is Zach, just in case he ever listens. Actually, Zachary. And I was just so amazed at how he could relate to other people. And I think that's the key. When you can relate to other people, regardless of what you believe or what they believe, you can find that common ground. I think that's what's going to create unity.
Yeah, I love that. So last question I'll ask you is just how can our audience connect with you, follow along, whether it be on socials, website?
Yes, well, I'm all over the socials. So I'm actually MJ McCallie Writes, and that's MJMCALLIWRITES. I'm on that Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/MJ McCallie Writes. If you want the professional side of me, Twitter. If you want the messy, chaotic, whole person side of me, Instagram and Facebook. And and I have a story called the I'm Sorry Story. It's from EduMatch Publishing, and I do a lot of author read alouds with different classes, and I've read from K through 8. So it's social emotional, and I do a lesson with them. So I would love to connect with anybody that is looking for that kind of connection.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Thanks, Ken.
Everything that you just shared, links, socials will all be linked up on our show notes page, which can be found at powereduup.com/teachbetter22.
Cool.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.